Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, December 2nd. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. The nation has been put on a fast track to elections after last night's meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Finance Minister Yair Lapid failed to save the fractured coalition. The meeting started with Netanyahu presenting Lapid with a list of 5 demands that he rejected as soon as he was out the door. The meeting was the first between the two men since the political crisis erupted a few weeks ago and was aimed at deciding if they could work together or if new elections must be called. Netanyahu's demands included that Lapid drop his zero-VAT housing plan and support Netanyahu's Jewish Nation bill. Current speculation is that the opposition motion to disperse the Knesset could pass a first reading tomorrow and elections could be scheduled for mid-March. Likud today announced that it will support the legislation submitted by Labor, Meretz, and other opposition parties. The bill must pass 3 readings in a process that is likely to take a week. The factions will then have to decide on a date for the elections, with March 17th and 24th already being considered. Speaking this morning at an economics conference in Tel Aviv, Lapid accused Netanyahu of leading the nation into an unneeded and unwanted elections. He accused the Prime Minister of lacking national responsibility and said that instead of helping the weakest elements of society by reducing the cost of living, he preferred to raise taxes and pay off the ultra-Orthodox at the expense of the middle class. Interior Minister Gilad Erdan lashed back at Lapid with a warning that if he continues to attack the Prime Minister, Netanyahu will fire him as Finance Minister. Yesh Atid may not wait for Netanyahu to fire Lapid. The faction is meeting today, and according to Social Affairs Minister Meir Cohen, the faction will consider whether to resign from the cabinet. IBA's Ari O'Sullivan was in the Knesset today and brings us these reactions to the possibility of new elections.
This is really unprecedented. This is going to be one of the shortest terms of parliament ever in the history of this country. Well, it's the fault, I think, of the Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu. He's not capable of running his own government, and the coalition is breaking up. And yeah, that's unfortunate. That's sad. That's not very good for the country. But you know, it's better to call early elections than to go on with this impossible situation.
Is this an opportunity for Meretz?
Yeah, no doubt it's an opportunity for Meretz. We will grow. Opinion polls show that we are going to increase our representation here.
We don't need an election. Elections are bad for the state of Israel. Elections are bad for the citizens of Israel. Yesh Atid party didn't want, we don't want elections, even though we believe, and I believe, that after the elections will be a bigger party, and our party, Yesh Atid party, will form the government, and Yair Lapid will be the prime minister, even though it's going to be good for the people of Israel. Elections right now are bad.
I'm not surprised that we're going to election. I believe it's the right time to go to election. We have to find out, the people of Israel have to decide which government they would like. A right-wing religious party government or central-left government. I, of course, support central-left government, which will go back to the peace process, which will change nationally the point of view of Israel about liberalism, democracy, etc., and which keep the Zionism and really the Jewish identity alive, because if we do not get rid from the Palestinians, let them build their own Palestinian state, we will lose the identity of Jewish people.
But the surveys say that the Tnuah will probably be wiped out.
You know, surveys are good just for the day had been done.
Our target is that the Arabs should vote as equal as the Jews, 70%. This means 2 to 3 more seats.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So you're looking forward to that?
Yeah, we want actually Lieberman to say to Lieberman, all the other racists and fascists that in the Knesset, you wanted us out, you will have us 15 seats next time.
Political commentator Amotz Asael says that elections at this time serve Prime Minister Netanyahu because he's convinced that the center-right bloc will be strengthened.
He apparently thinks that a new election will produce a political map that will be more favorable to him, with a bit more power to the center-right bloc, shifting from today's center, which is within his coalition and has been consistently, the way he sees it, a thorn in his side. If he now maneuvers the Israeli political system into its own election, then he wins more time and more time expires from this geopolitically unfavorable setting in which he is compelled to function. That would mean that until elections take place, and then until a new government emerges from the new coalition, and until it actually can actually be done business with, that will be from here at least half a year, and will already lead the entire world into next summer. And then Obama will really be, the way Netanyahu sees it, a sitting duck, and that will, the way he understands things, be for him favorable strategically.
Jerusalem residents were skeptical that the elections would bring any change.
I think that the election, it's not good for Israel. We have to wait like the law.
Going to new elections, just a waste of time, waste of money. Nothing's going to change because the political system in Israel is going to be the same thing. Nothing's going to change. Same coalition, same people. And as long as the system is not going to be changed here in Israel, I don't see what are we wasting our money on.
Joining us now to discuss the dramatic political developments is Jerusalem Post political reporter Gil Hoffman. Thanks so much for coming in. After Netanyahu's 5 demands of Lapid and the mutual mudslinging, are we certain that we are indeed heading for elections?
We are indeed heading to elections, Laura. The fun is on the way. Already today, all the different politicians are making their speeches blaming everybody but them for the election that we're going into. The slogans are already out, and the signs are going to be on the streets and the bumper stickers before you know it.
Gil, you were just at a press conference with Avigdor Lieberman. Anything new in that camp?
Well, you know, there had been some thought maybe Avigdor Lieberman would say, don't go to elections. Maybe you can form a government now without Yesh Atid, with the ultra-Orthodox parties. He was the one preventing such a government from being formed by Netanyahu all along. But no, he started out by saying elections are a bad thing, and then he just said, but we'll make the best of the situation and hope for the best possible government after the election.
Gil, it was just 18 months since the last elections. What was the most impelling cause, in your view, for the breakup of the coalition?
Netanyahu couldn't get along with the others with the other party heads in the coalition. He wanted to have a different government. You know, the cause was the coalition formed that the prime minister didn't want. If it weren't for Bennett and Lapid joining forces the way they did for that short-lived brotherhood partnership, then it would have been a lot easier right now.
Within Likud, there are apparently voices calling for former Minister Gideon Sa'ar to compete against Netanyahu for party leadership. Have you heard those voices? And how likely is it that Sa'ar will return to politics and run for that position?
Now, he's not going to, I don't think. Later, of course, Gideon Sa'ar was number 2 in Likud in the last 2 elections behind Netanyahu. He didn't want to run against him. He's a smart man. He knows that he can't beat him, but that once Netanyahu is gone. And Laura, Netanyahu will not last forever. He will not be our king for the next 40 years. Then he is a very serious candidate to be the prime minister after Netanyahu.
Among the other parties, who is the most realistic challenger to Netanyahu's leadership? Labor's Isaac Herzog, Yair Lapid, Yesh Atid, Naftali Bennett from Bayit Yehudi, Avigdor Lieberman.
You forgot about Moshe Kachlon, who has a press conference that might be more interesting in a little bit.
He's be touted as the new boy wonder.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, he's now an outsider. He's someone who's proven himself in electoral reforms. But, Laura, the answer to your question is definitely Herzog. Herzog is the leader of the left, whether Yair Lapid realizes it or not. He's someone who can get support from the ultra-Orthodox parties, who very well will decide who forms the next government. He can have Lieberman in his government. The one party that definitely will not be part of a Herzog-led government is the one closest to his views, which is Meretz. If Herzog forms a government, it will be a right-wing government with a left-wing prime minister.
Gil, the elections will take place in March. Netanyahu will most likely be elected once again. He'll form a new coalition with several other parties, as you mentioned. Except for spending $1 million shekels on elections, is anything going to change? $1 billion shekels, excuse me.
$1 billion shekels. So Netanyahu will form a government that will have in it the right-wing parties, the ultra-Orthodox parties. The ultra-Orthodox stipends are going to be reinstituted. Fewer of them are going to serve in the army. Fewer of them are going to be as part of the workforce. And the government will be more stable. He'll try to form the largest coalition possible so there won't be, as there was, one party that could at any given point threaten to bring the government down.
Gil Hoffman from the Jerusalem Post. That was great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure being with you, Laura.
Egypt thwarted an attempt by the Islamic State to target Israeli boats or gas fields in the Mediterranean Sea. 5 Egyptian servicemen were injured in the November 12th attack and 8 declared missing. Egyptian forces arrested 32 Islamic State operatives and destroyed 4 boats used by the jihadist group. According to a Channel 2 report, ISIS operatives staged an accident at sea, enabling them to install one of their operatives on an Egyptian missile boat heading for the port of Damietta. Egyptian officials dispatched other vessels to pursue the boat after their suspicions were raised during a routine radio exchange with the commandeered boat at the time of the incident. Egypt's official MENA news agency said an Egyptian Navy vessel was set afire during gun battles with ISIS operatives some 40 nautical miles north of Damietta. Aram Online said the Navy was performing a combat exercise in the Mediterranean when a number of boats were fired on. Israeli-Canadian citizen Jill Rosenberg, who traveled to Syria and Iraq to fight alongside Kurds against Islamic State, has posted on Facebook that she is safe, dispelling reports that emerged in jihadist-linked media earlier this week of her abduction by Islamic extremists. In her post, Rosenberg wrote that she has very infrequent internet access or any communication device. It is unclear who is running her Facebook page. After last week, she indicated in a post that she would be offline for some time and someone else would be updating her page. Kurdish sources had also called the reports of her capture false propaganda by Islamic State, insisting that no international volunteers are fighting in the Kobani area where her capture allegedly took place. The Kurdish sources added that international volunteers are not placed in combat roles at all, but rather support the frontline fighters. French lawmakers are expected to approve a non-binding resolution to recognize a Palestinian state today, following in the footsteps of Britain, Spain, and Sweden. The text of the resolution, presented by the ruling Socialist Party, invites the French government to use the recognition of a Palestinian state as an instrument to gain a definitive resolution of the conflict. Recently, French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said his country was prepared to host international talks to move the peace process forward, adding if the efforts fail, his country has to do its duty and recognize a Palestinian state. Commenting on the French vote, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said it would be a grave mistake for the French Parliament to recognize a Palestinian state. President Reuven Rivlin met today with Special Mideast Quartet envoy Tony Blair at the president's residence. This was the first time that Blair met Rivlin since he took office. The two men discussed the rehabilitation of Gaza, efforts to stabilize the situation in the West Bank, as well as regional developments and steps to combat enmity between Muslims and Jews.
We see eye to eye with you about all the problems and all the obstacles that we are facing here in the region. You know very well that the Israeli state have no war against Islam. We never thought that we should have war. Unfortunately, from time to time, there are extremists from both sides who really believe that something is going with the conflict between Jews and Muslims. And I can assure you that there is no one who thinks reasonable that ever paid any kind of believe that there is a war between Muslims and Jews.
I just want finally to say how much I agree with you about the issue of how different peoples of different faiths live together. I have a very clear view, actually, of this region as a whole, which is that the key to it is cultural acceptance across the boundaries of faith. Absolutely. And in the end, that is the only way the world can work today.
The citizens of Israel feel as if the game of soccer has been taken away from them. That's a view of President Rivlin, who spoke today during a conference against violence and racism in soccer at the Tel Aviv Jaffa Academic College. His remarks followed recent events in which fans behaved violently at games, including the Tel Aviv derby between Maccabi and Hapoel, when a fan attacked a player and other spectators invaded the pitch, causing an abandonment of the match. Rivlin said that there is no choice but to combat this phenomenon, even though whoever tries to combat violence can himself face the wrath of the haters. Environmentalists battling to preserve the Palmachim beach north of Tel Aviv declared a victory yesterday after the Central District Planning Committee rejected plans to build a 350-room holiday resort on the beachfront. The committee ruled the beach will remain an open space that will benefit the public and future generations. The Man, Nature, and Law Environmental Organization lauded the decision, saying it proved that public involvement guarantees environmental protection. The Ministry of Tourism and the investors of the resort called the decision illegal and said they would study the ruling. Yesterday's decision culminates some 4 years of battles between environmental groups campaigning to save the beach, the planning committee, and investors of the resort hotel. In sports news, Maccabi Tel Aviv rebounded from its thrashing at the hands of CSKA Moscow in the EuroLeague on Thursday to easily defeat Bnei Herzliya 89-73 last night at Nokia Arena. With a victory, Tel Aviv jumps into second place and improves its Israel League record to 7-2, but is still 2 games behind undefeated Hapoel Jerusalem. Devin Smith led Maccabi with 23 points, with 18 of them coming in the first half, when Tel Aviv opened up a 12-point advantage. Smith spoke with Israel television sports reporter Lian Vildau about the team's upcoming challenges.
In MVP, it looked like, as a team, it took you 1 quarter to shake off the CSKA game and regain confidence.
Yeah, we've been practicing well the last couple of days, and, we're just trying to make this game bleed into the next. When we play well in the league, it usually helps us a lot in the EuroLeague, so just trying to set the tone.
And we see the smiles during the interview as well.
Yeah, definitely. It feels good.
But with all due respect to Herzliya, Alba will be an all new ball game.
Yeah, I was a great team. They've been playing well lately, and, we got to come out prepared for them and, come out motivated to win the game.
There's a new movie coming out next week, and it's likely to be a blockbuster in Israel. It's Exodus, Gods and Kings, and recounts the story of Moses taking the Hebrews out of Egypt. Reporter Alexandra Jen is here to tell us more. Alexandra?
That's right, Laura. Like the Ten Commandments more than 5 decades ago, it is visually magnificent telling of the story of Exodus. It was directed by Ridley Scott, who has also done Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven, if you remember those epic films. Exodus, Gods and Kings, cost a modest $200 million to make and is already being criticized for blasphemy. Take a look.
You will perish! Follow me! You will be free!
Here come the plagues. English filmmaker Ridley Scott takes us on the riveting story of the Exodus. Scott brings us back to the Egyptian reign of Ramses when Moses frees the Israelites from Egypt. But of course, not without a strong resistance from Ramses and a series of torturous plagues.
That is far beyond you and I.
The focus of the 2.5-hour biopic is on the relationship of Ramses and Moses, similar to other interpretations of the story. Remember the 1956 Ten Commandments film starring Charlton Heston? Scott has criticized some of these scenes and wanted to bring a more authentic feel to certain events, now 60 years later. For example, the parting of the Red Sea. Scott hopes to bring a more natural and realistic tone to his scene. The director drew inspiration from personal accounts of an oncoming tsunami.
Went back to remembering the tragedy that occurred 6-7 years ago. It was the big tsunami, and I had that described by some journalists who said they'd watched the tide go out, and it went out and out and out, and so it went beyond where it should be.
But Scott is being criticized for the lack of authenticity in his all-white cast. The headliners of the film include Christian Bale, Joel Edgerton, Ben Kingsley, and Aaron Paul. And the critics don't stop there. They are also concerned with the Scott's portrayal of God in the infamous scene where he appears before Moses. So how is he depicted? You won't have to wait too long. The movie comes out in Israel on December 11th. Alexandra Jen for IBA News.
I just have one question. Can you get us tickets for the opening of that?
I surely can.
Thanks so much for that report. The month of December marks the beginning of Christmas holiday celebrations around the world, and Israel is no exception for the Arab Christian minority. Members of the community flocked to the annual Christmas tree lighting celebration in Jaffa last night. Men dressed up as Santa Claus greeted the children, while Christmas carols were heard over the loudspeakers. Fireworks lit up the skies over the port city in the countdown to the tree lighting ceremony. Christian Orthodox leaders addressed the crowd, saying this is the perfect opportunity to promote unity between Jews, Muslims, and Christians.
It's the best
example for all the citizens of Israel to see how people can do things that we can really take people from all the natures, Jews, Muslims, and put them together. This is the tree, lightning tree. I wish that this can bring peace to our land, to Israel, to Christians, Muslims, and Jews.
The World AIDS Day concert in New York's Times Square was nearly scuttled when U2's lead singer Bono was badly injured in a cycling accident in Central Park. The Irish rocker suffered injuries to his face and needed metal plates and screws in his shoulder. But the boss, Bruce Springsteen, came to the rescue, along with Coldplay's Chris Martin. They joined other U2 members to perform the group's songs.
The flame, I'm where the streets have no name.
Taking a look at local finance, and the shekel was down in foreign currency trading, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were mixed. Here's a look at the late afternoon numbers. Turning to the weather, and the forecast is calling for another rise in temperatures tomorrow, making it warmer than normal for the season. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours. And that's all for this newscast. Please join us again tomorrow at the same time when we'll be back with all the latest news from Israel and abroad. I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you a great evening. Shalom from Jerusalem.